I stood there for what felt like forever. Just standing in her hallway. Looking at it. Our wedding photo, the one from the Wilshire Inn, the one where Marcus is laughing and I have my head on his shoulder and we both look like we believe the whole world is ours. It was in a frame I had never seen before. On a wall that was not mine. In a life I did not know existed. And the worst part, the part one have never been able to explain to anyone, is that my first thought was not about Marcus. My first thought was about her. About how long she had been living with that photo. Looking at it every single day. Knowing what it meant. That was Diane Calloway. 49 years old. Married for 16 years to a man she would have described, right up until that Tuesday evening in October, as one of the genuinely good ones. What happened after she walked through that front door is not simply a story about a husband who lied. It is a story about two women, best friends for over 2 decades, and the secret that had been living inside their friendship like a splinter no one had ever thought to look for. This is the story of a woman who walked into her best friend's house on an ordinary October evening, and walked out of the life she thought she was living. The question is, when the two people you trusted most in this world chose each other over you, which betrayal do you grieve first? There are 3 questions at the center of this story. The first, how do you love someone for 16 years and never once suspect that the person standing beside you at every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary Sunday morning, was already somewhere else in ways you cannot yet name? The second, what does it cost a woman to look at her own life and finally ask the question she had been too afraid to ask, not because the answer was unknown, but because she already knew it? And the third, the one that stayed with Diane long after the lawyers and the paperwork and the sleepless nights had finally quieted, is it possible to feel grief for a friendship and a marriage at the same time, as 2 separate losses, 2 separate wholes, or does one always swallow the other? These are not easy questions. This story does not pretend they are. But they are honest ones. And honest questions are the only kind worth sitting with. Diane Calloway was the kind of woman who held things together. Not because anyone had asked her to, because it was simply what she did, the way some people are wired from the inside out toward steadiness. She was an occupational therapist at a rehabilitation center outside Columbus, Ohio. She worked with people who were learning to do ordinary things again after their bodies had failed them. She had a gift for that kind of patience, for sitting with someone in the hardest part of their becoming and making them feel like the hardest part was not the end of the story. Her husband Marcus was a project manager for a commercial construction firm. He coached youth baseball on Saturday mornings. He remembered to buy her the lavender hand lotion she liked without being asked. He was, by every visible measure, a present and attentive husband. Diane's friends told her she was lucky. She believed them. She had reason to. And then there was Carla Hines. Carla had been Diane's closest friend since they were both 26 and newly arrived at the same apartment complex in Westerville. They had built the kind of friendship that functions almost like a second marriage, the inside jokes that have no origin story anyone else would understand, the phone calls at 11 at night about nothing in particular, the way you can sit in a car together for 2 hours and not feel the silence as anything other than comfortable. Diane was maid of honor at Carla's first wedding. Carla was there the night Diane's mother died. They were, by the understanding of everyone who knew them, the kind of friends who did not happen very often. Carla had been divorced for 4 years by the time any of this began. Diane had tried to be careful with her, tried to make sure their dinners out and their weekend plans together never made Marcus feel crowded or left out. She had always been conscious of the balance. That was the kind of wife she was. Looking back, Diane would say the first thing she noticed, the first small wrongness, was a shift in the way Carla asked about Marcus. Not more often. Differently. The way someone asks about a person they are trying to keep at a careful distance from themselves. A slight, deliberate neutrality that had not been there before. Diane noticed it the way you notice a smell in a room that you cannot quite identify, not alarming, not specific, but present. She filed it somewhere she was not ready to open. Then came the spring Marcus started working late on Thursdays. He had always been consistent about evenings home, he was not a man who made a habit of late nights. But the Thursday pattern held through April and into May, and when Diane mentioned it once, gently, Marcus had a reason, a development project downtown, a contractor whose timeline kept shifting. It was a reasonable explanation. She accepted it. She had no particular reason not to. Looking back, the first sign looked like nothing. That is exactly why no one thought to ask. She had watched other people move through it, had helped patients navigate the physical residue of emotional devastation, and what she found inside herself was both familiar and entirely different from what she had anticipated. The marriage ended. Marcus did not fight it. He was the kind of man who, once he had been seen clearly, did not argue against the seeing. He moved into an extended-stay hotel in November and began the quiet process of separating his life from hers. Diane's friends arrived with casseroles and anger and the particular loyalty that comes forward when one woman is hurt and other women can clearly see the shape of what was done to her. She was grateful for all of it. It helped in the way that being held helps, not by fixing anything, but by making the weight less solitary. What surprised her was how long it took her to cry about Carla. The marriage she could grieve in the ways she recognized, the loss of a shared life, of shared plans, of the small domestic architecture that two people build together over 16 years. She knew how to name those losses. She had vocabulary for them. The friendship was something else. The friendship did not fit inside any existing grief. It was the loss of a person who had been, in some very real sense, the person she would have called about something like this. The absence of the person she would have turned to was inseparable from the wound itself. 3 hard truths settled inside Diane in the months that followed, and they are the kinds of truths that do not arrive loudly. They arrive the way certain realizations arrive, slowly, and then all at once, and then quietly, and then permanently. The first, some losses do not resolve. They settle. And settling, the moment you stop waiting for the pain to have a conclusion and begin simply incorporating it into who you are, is its own kind of courage. Diane reached that place in February. She stopped expecting to stop missing who Carla used to be, or who she had believed Carla to be, and began simply carrying it as something that had happened to her and made her more specific. The second, the most powerful transformations rarely look like strength from the inside. From the inside they look like surviving Tuesday. And then Wednesday. And then the first Sunday in March when she found herself at a farmer's market alone, buying tulips because she wanted tulips, and realizing that for the first time in a very long time the wanting had come from herself and not from anyone else. The third, the photograph. She thought about it often, not the marriage it represented, but the decision it revealed. A man who placed his wedding photo in his girlfriend's hallway was not a man who had made a mistake. He was a man who had made a choice, and then made it daily for 4 years, and the understanding of that distinction was the thing that finally allowed Diane to put it down. Not to forgive, necessarily. But to stop carrying it as evidence of her own failure to see. She had not failed to see. She had trusted. That is a different thing entirely. Diane does not have the photograph. She did not take it from Carla's wall that evening, and she did not ask for it afterward. She told a friend later that she did not want it back, that what it had been was already gone, and the physical object was just paper and glass. What she kept instead was something harder to name and harder to take from her, the knowledge of what she was made of. What she had done with the hardest year of her life. Who she had been inside it. Some stories end. Some just become part of who you are. The ones that stay with you are usually the ones that were trying to show you something you were not yet ready to see, something about the nature of trust, about the cost of certainty, about what it means to love someone fully and still not be able to protect yourself from what they choose to do with that love. Diane is still an occupational therapist. She still works with people who are learning to do ordinary things again after the worst has happened. She says she is better at it now. That she understands something she did not understand before, that the hardest part of recovery is not the first step. It is learning to believe that the ordinary things are worth learning again. If a story, a character, or a moment has stayed with you longer than it should have, what do you think it was trying to tell you that you had not yet understood? I want to ask you that question directly, because I think you have an answer, and I think the answer is worth something. Drop it in the comments. Tell me what stayed. Tell me what it was trying to show you. In the next story on this channel, I am exploring a moment that looked like the end of something, until it revealed itself as the only real beginning. You will not want to miss it. If stories like this one stay with you, you know what to do.